You're listening to the Vent Podcast, where we bring you interviews and stories from around the world of wine and spirits. From winemakers and critics to sommeliers and master distillers, we'll explore the people and businesses who are instrumental in shaping the future of today's food and drinks culture. Enjoy the show. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Vent Podcast, a production of the Vent Marketplace, your source for premium wine and spirits at ventmarketplace.com. As always, I'm joined by Billy Galanko, who's fresh off his Super Bowl win. Congratulations to you and your Pennsylvania teams.
Yes. As a Steelers fan, the Eagles mean a lot to me. I thought you were going to mention my week last week. No, the Super Bowl was great, but I was coming off a whirlwind week of a seminar for the Stage 1 Master of Wine program. It's really hard to explain to people what goes on there because I think a seminar is just you're at like a conference where people have speakers and they just talk the whole time. So I didn't really, they gave us like an outline of what we were going to do, but I didn't really know exactly what to expect. But basically every day for the most days just started with a 12 wine blind exam where basically you have to not only identify the wines, but then you answer based on, they basically group them into different sections and you have to say different things about them, their commercial viability, what they are, how they were made. The questions varied, but it was cool. It was the first time I'd done like 12 wines blind in that testing format, but it was neat. We'd go through, do the exam for 2 hours and 15 minutes, talk about them. And yeah, I was much more comfortable and excited now that I got pretty good at it by the end of the week. So that was exciting.
Nice. Did you know anyone like of the other students there just from the wine world at all? Was there anyone that you ran into? Not really.
No, not really. Some people I'd connected on like LinkedIn before, and I'd gone to a set of course days. So there were some folks, but there's people from all over. There are retailers, people from all over the world. There's only
how many
3
students?
of these. There's about between 30 and 40 students right now. So there are 3 places you can do the Stage 1 seminar. One is in Austria, one is in Adelaide, Australia, and then one is here. Mm-hmm. So we had people flying in from all over the world because you have to pick one of the 3 to go to.
Sure, yeah.
So that was cool.
So you have everyone from Asia, probably, right?
Yeah, we had a lot of folks from Asia for sure. They can also go down to Adelaide, but I think Napa, if you're not based in the US, is such an interesting wine market. It's something you hear a lot about. The US is one of the top selling wine markets in the whole world. So a lot of people want to come here and see what it's all about because we had a lot of presentations on industry data as well as people from different regions. So we had like a presentation from the VDP on German wines. We had a port presentation from somebody as well. We got to taste 12 port wines. So it was really cool to dive into each region. We had Australia and got really nitty gritty on a bunch of these.
This might be a hard question to answer, but how much of what's the level of assumed knowledge? Obviously, you're like very far along and they know that you've been through a ton of study, but is there, like they don't soften anything, I'd assume, when they're presenting, doing education, or how would you talk about the level of assumed knowledge?
Yeah, the level of assumed knowledge, they're telling you some of these, but yeah, it's basically, you're supposed to technically have mastery over every aspect of the wine world. So it's as nitty gritty on every topic as you can get. And the part of the point is to give you these details for some of those regions and nuances. Like we're parsing the differences between like regional Spätburgunder, like regional Pinot Noir from Germany, for example, or what are the small nuances in Riesling profile from region to region there. So like that's in terms of some of the tasting, but yeah, you're expected to know. And then if you don't, that's why they do this 4 months ahead of the first exam. Cause they're like, you should probably know these by the time you get here.
Yeah. Got it. Very cool. Mm-hmm. Good. Glad you got your feet wet. Now it'll be even easier, not easier, but you'll know what to expect for next time too.
Yeah. Just got to start ramping up for the tasting more and ramping up for the exam. Come June. That'll be excited, and I'll be going on a couple of trips as well for the MW student trips that I got accepted to recently. So we're working through how we're going to work here, but I'll be going to Burgundy and Bordeaux at the end of March.
Sweet. That's awesome.
Yeah, that'll be great. Cool. So for the news today, let's touch on the news, and then we'll get to our really exciting guest, somebody I've really wanted to have on. It gives us a really unique perspective from the world of wine in terms of younger consumers. But first, the news. While we were up there, we did a bunch of, my seminar was in Napa. So while we were up there, we actually got to taste at a number of different wineries, and we tasted a bunch of the 2023 wines. People showed us, maybe they gave us like a 10 or 15-year-old wine, like a 10-year-old wine, and then some of the more recent vintages as well. I want to touch on the article from last week that was about Napa's 2023 vintage. It was cool and classic. And then the lines here that we have, it produced wines of elegance, freshness, and depth from a bygone era. I heard from a lot of the producers firsthand that yields weren't like over the top because it was a little cooler and the wines were very balanced. So it was cool to taste those next to some of the super hot, maybe drought years that we had in the past.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you have a cool spell for those wines and you can get a little bit more acid, I think that it's hard to miss for Napa in those vintages. You know what I mean? Just as a break from what can be the usual heat and quick ripening season. Yeah, any vintage notes that acknowledge that element of the growing season as being like prolonged, where maybe you had a little bit longer ripening. I get excited about seeing what comes out of it, especially from the top producers.
For sure. And I wanted to call out, so we had a bunch of interesting back vintage wines across the board, like including the 95 Robert Mondavi, also tasting that compared to the 2005, and then they gave us another recent vintage. But one night we went to the Louis Martini winery. They were hosting us, and we had 1965 Barbera from Napa Valley, 87 Zinfandel, a 1970 Cabernet Sauvignon, and what was the other one? It was a Merlot from 99. So that was cool. I was happy they busted out some of the more interesting varieties along with just Cabernet and Merlot. But the Barbera is still super vibrant, really, really fresh fruit, still packed with red fruits. You would never have guessed it was however many years old that is. What is that? Almost 60 years. Yeah. So that was pretty neat. I'll have to share
Nice.
more offline with you about what else we tasted.
The 87 Zen, what I've heard of Big Ridge fans, right? And so you hear talking about like their Linton Springs and their guys, like all their Zins that they do aging really well. It's hard for me to imagine 40 years on type of wine. What are the sort of tertiary?
Yeah, it was very light in color. Yeah, it was very light in color. There was like very nice cocoa notes that had developed almost like a balsamic-y character as well. You definitely got more like the leather, but the acid that was in the variety, this is more of an old style of Zin. Obviously, it wasn't really big. So it was still these depths of almost savory umami type stuff, along with some bright acid. Obviously, the fruit was gone. It was, maybe if you had any, it was like super baked, almost burned dried fruit remaining, but it was still like tart and vibrant and really expressive in that tertiary way.
Very cool.
Yeah. And another thing for a potential podcast guest, we had an offsite thing where we all went to different wineries, and I went up to Pride Mountain, up right on the top of the Mayacamas in between Napa and Sonoma. There's actually a line down the vineyards that dictate which part is Sonoma and which part is Napa. They actually have to like age barrels on one side of their cave to make sure it's in Napa rather than Sonoma, which is pretty funny. But that was really cool mountain fruit. And we're going to potentially have their winemaker on the podcast. This is actually news to Brady, but I talked to him about coming on. And I think that'll be fun because Pride Mountain's one of those iconic mountain fruit producing vineyards that we always talk about. And it was cool. And there was a lot of downpour at the time too. So there were landslides left and right. We actually had to evacuate the mountain before we got stuck at the top. So it was a true intense winter mountain Napa experience.
Very cool. Yeah, that's good. We haven't had any winemakers on, I don't believe yet, in 2025. So we'll kick off our winemaker season.
Oh yeah, I have another tease for you as well. A well-known Virginia winemaker who was an MW there who's going to come on as well. So
here we go.
We'll tease that one later.
Nice.
Awesome. For our guest today, I'm really excited to have Jess Druey on. She's the founder of Whiny Baby, and this is something that we've been talking about a lot on the podcast this year, and it's been really big in the wine industry as a whole, is how to reach younger consumers. Younger consumers, you hear in the news, aren't drinking as much wine. They are. It might just be in a different style. And this brand, Whiny Baby, is a brand started by a person who is a Gen Z person, young person, and also has really her finger on the pulse and what kind of resonates with these younger consumers. So it's really cool to hear her insights and then hear more about how the brand started, how the wine's kind of made, what it's made of, the quality of the wine, and how they're really going about growing the brand. I thought it was fascinating.
Yeah, I thought that Jess is a great representation of all the things that we talk about frequently when we talk about like young people getting into wine. What are they looking for? How do you bridge cultural relevance and quality wine. She doesn't come from within the industry. And so I think she brought a lot of really cool ideas. And she even acknowledges in the podcast that for our maybe legacy consumers or collectors or people deeply embedded in the traditional industry listening to the podcast, it's going to be pretty different in the way that she thinks about and approaches her business. But I think it's really cool in the fact that she's thinking totally differently about how to reach folks, not just young people, but in general. Talks about Red Bull and her time there and how that influenced her, which I think is really neat.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting because the way she's communicating with folks, the way her packaging is set up, everything she's doing is authentically and in mind to reach these younger people and resonate with them, rather than a group of old people trying to put together what they think might resonate with a younger audience. She's doing it not only from experience, but she's in a lot of communication with the people who are buying her wine. So I think it's really cool to see this new wave of listening to the younger consumer, hearing what they want, trying to meet their needs, and really working in a proactive manner like that. So I think it was really cool, and I think it's just the tip of the iceberg for the future of wine in this country.
Yeah, you can pick up their wines at Target, Total Wine, Bevmo, I think. Is that right? And I think more places in the future, this year in 2025, wider distribution. So I'm going to pick up a few bottles up at my local Total Wine. And so hope you enjoy our interview with Jess. But before we get into that, remember, check out our wine and spirits retail store at vintmarketplace.com. On there, you can find wines from all around the world. We have one of the largest selections of wine in the U.S., so the most competitive pricing for enthusiasts and collectors. Vint Marketplace is your go-to shop for stocking your wine cellar. And so now, without further ado, here is Jess Druey of Whiny Baby Wines.
All right, we are here with a very special guest today, Jess Druey. Thank you so much for joining today.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, we would have mentioned a little bit more on the intro ahead of this actual interview, but it's really exciting to have you on the podcast just a few weeks after I first saw your bottle in Target and actually dragged my wife over to show her the bottle and how it really stood out on the shelf. So I'm really excited to have you on here to talk about how you're creating a wine brand that's resonating with younger wine drinkers. Something that we've gone on here has been an issue. And tell us and learning a little bit more about your unique background. So can you tell us a little bit about maybe how you got into wine, your TV show success, and how you started the brand?
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. There's no greater feeling than knowing what you created is actually working and jumping off the shelf and speaking to people in the aisle. That's really the origin story began for myself in a grocery store aisle. So I have no background in wine other than I'm from Bakersfield, California, which is part of the Central Valley, huge agriculture community. So grew up around a lot of farming families and have a lot of respect for anybody in ag. So beyond that, though, I think that people can be lumped into two categories. People who were raised with a family where your parents would open a bottle of wine at dinner or not. And I fell into the not category. And I think that the wine industry maybe has failed to realize those two categories. And if you didn't grow up in a family or an environment where wine was naturally around you, the terminology, the varietals, even the word varietals sounds like a foreign language, right? No one is really given wine education at some point in their life unless they seek it out or were raised in it. But I got really fortunate. I'm a college dropout and I moved to LA and started working in video production and landed a gig at Red Bull, where I didn't know at the time was priming me perfectly for Whiny Baby. And I believe that Red Bull is the greatest beverage marketer of our generation. And the wine industry would be in a much better place if it took just a few notes from Red Bull's playbook. So the long story goes, I was working at Red Bull, 2020 hit, and in LA, all the restaurants closed down. And I went from working in office to working remote like many people. And for the first time, started focusing on my personal life. So I was 22, and so I'm 27 now. Gen Z Barely. I think 97 is the cutoff, and I was born in 97. So I claim the Gen Z name, but I had a first date with a guy that I matched with on a dating app, and he was a little bit older than me, so a little intimidating. And he said, "Why don't you come over? I'll cook for you. You bring a bottle of wine." And it hit me like a ton of bricks at 22 years old. My only experience with wine up to that point was grabbing a, excuse my language, shitty bottle of rosé that stuck out to me for when my girlfriends and I would watch The Bachelor. Or I would be on a date with a guy and I'd look at the wine list with no clue what the words meant. And I'd just say, "Oh, I'll have what he's having." Or I did actually end up finding my comfort order, which weirdly was a Zinfandel. I knew that it was safe because I liked the way it tastes, the cherries, and it sounded fancy and I could pronounce it and I remembered it. So I would just be like, "Oh, my gosh, it's Zinfandel." And that was it. I remember looking at the wine aisle and I became obsessed from then on out with the fact that, oh my gosh, if I'm 22 years old, I'm standing in a Whole Foods right now and there's no bottle of wine that I know to grab for this first date. There's clearly a need in this industry.
Nice. Yeah. And I assume when you're at Red Bull, you got the bug on the big, bold, powerful, make a splash marketing.
Oh, yeah.
It all, because the brand that you've created is very like pop art, colorful, current, shareable, all of those kinds of things. You want to talk about some of the way that you've positioned the brand, and then we can talk about the wine?
Definitely. Yeah, Red Bull taught me so much. And I think even my job title, being a athlete producer, so I oversaw the athlete video productions, and the fact that my role fell into quote unquote Red Bull Media House, which was a branch of their marketing arm, taught me that, oh my gosh, this is a beverage brand and they have a whole production company that's winning sports Emmys. And so it taught me that the greatest brands represent a lifestyle and something beyond the product itself. I think most people are fans of the lifestyle of Red Bull, even if they don't necessarily enjoy the product, which I think is obviously incredible. To your point, my brand, I'm very passionate about the fact that Whiny Baby is so much more than just a cool label. Billy, I think you mentioned that you recognize that the back is a peel and stick, fill out back label. And any of these major brands can sit in a boardroom and ideate a cool, trendy label, stick it on a bottle, and find an influencer to partner with and market it. That's what they are doing. The Whiny Baby difference is I'm not a celebrity. I'm not an influencer. I am just a true Gen Zer and recognized a need that my community was looking for. And that night on the date, rather than focusing on my date, I was focused on the details of the bottle and how to truly reimagine the wine drinking experience from the moment you're picking it out on the shelf all the way to the end when you're consuming it. And so you can see that through the fact that we have 3 blends: white blend, red blend, slightly fizzy rosé blend. And that's because blends are a little bit more easily drinkable. But if someone out there is starting their wine drinking journey and they're anything like I was, they're like, what the heck is a varietal? So we want to remove the complication of that. Red, white, rosé, let's make it easy. This should be your starting point in wine. And then you'll notice that we have big words rather than red wine, white wine. You know, that is on the bottle, but what's larger is the word. So white is unwind, red is obsessed, and rosé is OMG. And that was of the mindset that when I was going to buy wine, it was for a reason or an occasion. So if you're going to a birthday party or an engagement, grab that OMG. If you're having that first date, maybe you'll grab Obsessed, or for a family dinner. And then if you're just chilling by yourself, maybe Unwind. And of course, it's interchangeable how you want to use them. And that's just, again, another kind of detail that enhances and helps the consumer's journey. And then probably my favorite detail is the crown caps. You open them up and there's a surprise conversation starter, everything from what's a book you're reading to the craziest place you've done the deed. Alcohol's for over 21, so we can be a little risque. And everything in between, spin the bottle and making it really interactive. And then the back is that fill out, peel and stick label, date, location, memories from the bottle. People peel them off and stick them in a picture frame or put them in a journal. And again, those were all just details that really I don't think have been done before, definitely not done before all together in one product, and are meant to just enhance what wine already does, which is, of course, bring people together and create memories.
Yeah, wow. That's all actually really thoughtful. Like now I'm like flashing back to my time with it as a more of a wine person. I didn't quite get all of that nuance right away. Was it Snapple back in the day that used to have the little fun facts under the cap?
It's funny.
That's
People
cool.
say that all the time. And to be honest, I think I'm a little too young to fully have experienced it, but I definitely know about it.
Yeah, wow. Like now I was going to say you might actually be like, I can't even remember the last time I found a bottle that had something underneath like a Snapple. Cool. And that's really interesting. I like the way that you named the wines for an occasion. No, normally I'm thinking about this from, I used to work for wine producers and we would go through labels again and try to rename wines. And that is completely the other, like to your point earlier, that's different from looking at it from an outside of wine point of view. Like what as a user, what would I want to be thinking about, or why am I getting this wine? Not what's a cool fanciful name that makes it seem really exciting, or what can we do with this back label to tell the story about what's in it? Also, you're smart with the blends as you guys scale over time. That also makes that a lot easier. So you're not trapped to a certain
Important
grade.
note, when I self-launched, before I had my partners, I kept my full-time job at Red Bull and just figured it out on my own. I sourced bulk wine, got a type 85 license, direct to consumer, California only, did shipping it out by myself with my mom. And the wine I went with for my proof of concept batch was a cab and a shard, which just shows I had no clue what I was doing. I literally Googled top selling wines. And that's definitely not what Gen Z is drinking. I've learned along the way and continue to learn. The Whiny Baby will continue to adapt over time, but the blends came in the second iteration.
Nice. I want to talk about two things. You can pick which way we go first. One would either be Whiny Baby and how the name came about, and how that name does have a lot of legs. So you could actually do a lot of things with it in terms of building out a lifestyle thing like Red Bull. Second would be what Gen Z is drinking now. I think I go to, like I've mentioned before many times on this podcast, I live within walking distance of 5 natural wine bars. When people say wine's dying or the young people don't go, I go to these bars here in LA and they're packed with young people, much younger than I am, and I'm only 35. So what do you think young people are drinking? And I guess we'll get back to the Whiny Baby brand.
I'll answer the name question fast because it's the number one question, but the easiest one. It literally came to me the day I walked out of that Whole Foods. I was like, I'm going to start a wine brand, name it Whiny Baby. How it was available is beyond me, and forever grateful that I grabbed it up. But in a deeper sense, it does stand for, first of all, I'm the biggest Whiny Baby out there. I'm a little bit self-deprecating, and so is the brand. And I think that everybody in the state of the world needs to be. We just need a little bit more humor and joy. Not everything is that serious. And then, of course, the wine industry historically takes itself a little too seriously. So it's a nod to that. It's a nod at Gen Z, I always like to say. And a lot of people, older people, agree with this. If you've ever worked with a Gen Zer, you'll definitely understand the Whiny Baby innuendo. And lastly, Whiny Baby, it represents not just Gen Zers, anyone who is a baby or new on their wine drinking journey. Take your first steps in wine with us. But back to what you were saying, I couldn't agree more. I was living in Los Angeles before I moved back to my hometown, and there's something interesting going on that I don't think enough people are talking about. And it's, yes, of course, the industry not grasping younger consumers. I had the same experience you have. Me and my friends drink wine all the time. We love our local wine bars. But there is a divide in when I host dinner parties, what people bring to the party is not necessarily what you would see in big box stores. And so I think this boutique, I don't like to use the word natural wine scene. I'm sure as many people do, but the boutique small producers, the style of wines that they're making, there's a divide between that and what you're seeing in big box stores. And I have a long way to go in terms of bridging that divide, but that is definitely a goal of mine. And so Whiny Baby wines, they're approachable, they're blends, they are stylistically more explorative, I would say, and they're crushable and fun, which I think is similar qualities that you're seeing in these small batch wine, the wines that these small batch producers are making and that you're seeing in these local spots. So I have the exact same experience that you have. I'm like, Gen Z is not drinking wine. Where?
I saw a chart the other day and it was like, Gen Z doesn't drink alcohol. Isn't Gen Z 11 to 26 or 25 or something?
Give us a chance.
Yeah, it's just such a bizarre thing to be talking about, honestly, that Gen Z doesn't drink wine because you're calling yourself Gen Z. I'm pretty sure you're not that much younger, if at all, than I am. And I call myself millennial because I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I have no idea who's who.
Millennials, for sure. Yeah.
I have no clue who's who. I call Billy old millennial. I'm just young millennial.
There we go. There we go.
Yeah, I think that like you called the brand for folks who are new to wine, right? And it's an entry level brand, which there's nothing wrong with that. Like we need a space for that. That's how we're going to grow the industry and continue to grow it. But everyone that we've talked to who has a wine position in that category also thinks about how consumers graduate, quote unquote, with a lowercase g from that category. So how do you, when someone starts with your wines and starts exploring wine more broadly, what do you envision the sort of jumping off points being? Like, what would be the next step after someone enjoys your wines?
That's what I think about all day, every day. So I love this question, and there's so much that I'm excited to do that's in the works. I think, first of all, this like entry level category is difficult because people see a label like mine and they automatically assume it. Our wines are, if you have tried them, and for someone who's maybe more advanced on their wine drinking journey, they may feel on the sweeter side, but they are well balanced, juicy, crushable. You don't drink them and go, oh, they're beautiful, ultra premium quality wines that are just in a more approachable, fruit forward style. So I think, first of all, the leap of even when I'm at the store buying, if I see a label and it doesn't feel sophisticated, I think that the wine itself isn't sophisticated, which isn't the case. So I think that's one thing that we need to get over. To your point about future innovation, first of all, we've been developing an orange wine, which again goes back to my experience like in LA. I wasn't seeing an orange on any like major big stores. We're starting to see it now. But when I would like host dinner parties, my friends would bring an orange wine. And I talked to them. First of all, this just shows that like I am not afraid to not know. And that's the beauty of it. Like me and my friends, first of all, they didn't even think about how the wine was made. But when I heard skin contact, I literally thought that meant that the winemaker was like hands-on, like more hands-on with the wine making. Obviously not true. And then it sounds insane to someone who's been in wine, but my friends literally, some of them thought that it came from oranges or there was some element of orange in the wine. And then lastly, a lot of them didn't even like the taste of that orange wine because a lot of orange wines can get real funky. And I personally don't love funk, and I personally don't love sediment and all that. And honestly, neither really do my friends, but they were grabbing it because it was like, cool. We have been developing a gorgeous orange blend that is predominantly Gewürztraminer and Chenin Blanc, and it is so yummy and tastes like fresh grapefruit juice. And I can't wait. It'll, in my opinion, complete the Whiny Baby lineup of these 4 blends. And then to your point about educating consumers and bringing them beyond, I think the future of wine and innovation in wine lies in education. So I'm really passionate about entertainment and media and making wine relevant in that way. And I think that the industry, I think we've forgotten that we have a task to educate consumers. Like anytime you bring a new product to market that's a new category, it's the responsibility of the brand to teach the consumer. And I think wine has forgotten that although we're one of the oldest products in the world, we're still new to some people, and that requires a level of education. And so with Whiny Baby, what's next is showing everybody that, hey, if you loved our red, which is my favorite, our chilled red, or chillable if you want, it's predominantly Zinfandel and Merlot. And if you are ready to venture out into individual varietals, you should probably start with a Zinfandel because you'll like and recognize those cherry flavors. And I don't have the exact answer on how this is all going to happen, but that's where my mind is at and what some of the projects we're working on.
Yeah, I didn't know if you have Whiny Baby, then there's another line that's like Big Baby or something, right? Like
teenager. Yeah.
Keep those wines
maybe
in-house.
I may steal that. I think though,
I just picked up the LLC actually.
Damn it, so smart. I'm gonna have to pay you. It's interesting though because I think I also have the hurdle of I want Whiny Baby to develop and become a bit more gender neutral, and then I think I also want it to become a bit more generational neutral because it really is. It's meant for anybody starting on their wine journey. Typically, that is Gen Z or people in there who newly are 21 and whatnot. But I know plenty of people who are older that are like, I still don't know where to begin in wine. So those are some of the hurdles and adaptations that I want to make with Whiny Baby along the way.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. I think like 95% of most people don't know anything about wine. And if they'll just pretend they do, or they're drinking Chardonnay and Cab and Pinot Grigio because they're told they're supposed to. Like I grew up, my family didn't really drink wine at all. I only got into wine in my like mid to late 20s and I went like a very nerdy reading approach. And if you don't do that, I'm not sure how you learn unless you have a family member who like, I guess, walks you through it.
And we don't communicate enough that it's a lifelong learning. Like everybody, us three are still learning. And I think if more people in the industry admitted that and like broadcast that, I think the everyday person would be like, oh, wait, it's not something you learn or just don't know. It's a journey you start taking.
Yeah, for sure. You always are discovering new things about places, new people, like I think there's like a common misconception that like everybody knows the best producers and I just don't know them yet. But once I do, there's a finite amount of them and that's good to go. I did want to ask, and I thought, so I looked at your package and I was like, this is definitely innovative. It's cool, but sometimes those things come out and it's like package only, no juice inside. Like you were saying, it's quality because I noticed the price point and it was, I think at Target, it was like $17.
Yeah.
And to me, what that actually said is this is quality. Like I understand what goes into making a wine. And if you're having the packaging you're having, that wouldn't make it that expensive. So I thought that was really interesting. Is that something you're trying to convey to your consumers as well?
100%. Again, I'm 27. I'm new to all this and I didn't go to business school. I'm learning as I go, and I am not afraid to not know things because I partner with incredible people, and I can get into the story of finding my current partners and how that's all came about. But I'm incredibly grateful to have worked with and continue to work with people who have been in the industry and are experts both in winemaking, but also in wine in the retail space. And so with that is pricing. I think my first batch I did online DTC was $30 a bottle. And that was literally just because I was like, that's kind of like, if I'm being really honest, what it was my go-to gift was always like VU, and I think that's 60. And that's a nice gift, right? It would be like a gift you're bringing over for a nice dinner or a birthday. And so in my head, I was kind of like, what would be an approachable, I don't want this to be like just a gift, but I want it to be something they could enjoy every day, but also nice enough that you feel good about bringing it as a hostess gift. So I did 30 then. That is absolutely insane and ridiculous. And we know the numbers of what the most purchased wine in the US is far below that. And so then our SRP is around $17.99. And it's funny because even that, when talking with my partners, I was like, and here's where, as an entrepreneur, I think that I am constantly trying to not judge things based off of my bubble. Like exactly what you were saying. I'm like looking around. I'm like, my friends all drink wine. Okay, I clearly need to understand the rest of the country. And with that, of course, comes price point. And so a lot of my friends have said, and this sounds, it sounds probably wildly incorrect and shows just some of the privilege of California or New York or whoever I'm speaking to at that time. But a lot of them will go, oh, I wouldn't typically grab a bottle under $20 or something like that. That's some weird made up thing in their head. There's no basis for that. But it just shows that people really have no clue when it comes to wine. And there's certain things like the label, like the price point, that they're going like, okay, this must be like a good wine. In all transparency, I imagine that Whiny Baby's price point may develop over the years because my intent is for Whiny Baby to be these boutique style, the emerging kind of wine that we're seeing in these LA, New York wine bars, but accessible for everyone. And actually, when I launched the 3 blends with my partners, the McBride sisters, they had asked me, what approach would you want to take? We could go and like target like New York, LA, these metropolitan kind of young hotspot areas. And I was like, no. I want someone in Ohio who's never even heard of an orange wine to be able to go to Target or Bevmo and grab an orange wine.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting to me. That was the other thing that I guess from working in the wine industry, I mentioned to my wife, I was like, Target doesn't just carry, like it's not really regional. Like you need to be in a majority of the Targets or have your product accepted to be sold across. So I was like, that was the other interesting thing is cool. This wine is like going to be available to my family in like Pennsylvania,
Yes.
who like every Thanksgiving I bring a wine and have to explain like what
Yes.
wine is. And I thought that was really interesting. And to your point, like $17 in some of those markets is actually a premium price point. That is
Yeah.
a nice gift to bring to a party. So I thought
100%.
that was neat. And then now that I know what your orange wine blend, I'm excited about that as well. But just hearing that, you clearly have thought about the blend and the balance, because I could see that Gewürztraminer with its aromatics, but low pH or lower acid, and then the Chenin brightens it up. Clearly, these are going to be fun and actually good intros to people who may not be drinking some of these. So that's exciting. What is the ABV on this? And is that something that you also considered along the way as well. And then on that same line, I was reading an article from the UK. If you could tell me more about zebra striping, if you've ever heard the term, and then also damp drinking lifestyle.
Not heard of zebra striping. This is totally new to me.
That might be a Gen Z thing in the UK because they were like, this is what they're doing. It's apparently doing what you're supposed to do is having an alcoholic drink and then a non-alcoholic drink and then an alcoholic drink. So one is white, one is black.
I definitely am familiar with doing that.
Instead of just being full burn.
Yeah, no, they had a name. They had to explain it. And I was like, wait, isn't this what we're taught to do?
Responsible drinking, but yes, I myself am a zebra striper as well. I love that. Yeah, so our white blend is 11.5% and the red and the rosé are 13. These RS and ABV and acidity, and those were all very new things to me. So I mentioned I skipped over it, and it's important to note because I think people like hear my story and it's okay. I worked at Red Bull. I figured out how to do this like proof of concept on my own, and then poof, I'm in Target, right? And so what happened was I knew I was like in over my head, and I also knew that I was fortunate to be in LA where there's a lot of young aspiring entrepreneurs in different spaces. And I've been fortunate to have a lot of other CPG founder friends. And this isn't true for them necessarily, but with wine and alcohol, we don't see the innovation we should because they make it near impossible for young brands. The amount of people who try and fail, it's near impossible. And so I recognize that I could raise $10 million and I wouldn't have the infrastructure. I wouldn't have the ability. Half of your job is working with distributors and managing distributors. I didn't even know what a distributor was when I launched. And it actually shows in the fact that I LinkedIn DM'd like all the major buyers for stores, like not knowing that that's like kind of illegal. And when I eventually did have meetings with them with my distributor, I was like, this is really embarrassing, but you can't unsend a LinkedIn message. So if you go, like you have a LinkedIn message from me. And thankfully they were all very gracious and thought it was funny. But all that to say, we're not seeing the innovation that we should because of the difficulties of the industry. And I recognize that and recognize that really no amount of money I could raise would change that. And so I dreamed up a strategic partnership and I went, look, there's these major brands that are like, want what I have, which is a community, the innovation, the understanding, and they have what I need, which is the winemaking excellence, the distribution, the operations. And I do a lot of podcasts because I found my partners they were on How I Built This, the McBride sisters, and they are absolutely incredible. And I heard their story on How I Built This, and I pretty much begged until I got a meeting with them. And very, very forward of me was like, I have no clue if you are even in a place with your company to take on a strategic partnership, but this is what I'm looking for. And I launched Whiny Baby, I think formally on my own in 2023 of April or 2022. I should really know exactly off the top of my head. But we hit Target, Bevmo, Total Wine, August of 2023. It was like a fast jump, and it was because obviously I partnered with some really incredible people and they got it. They trusted me, and together we were able to like work at lightning speed to start bringing this product to market.
You guys in Total Wine as well?
Yes.
I thought so. Okay, because I was looking up and it seemed because we don't sell alcohol in our Targets here in Maryland or in any store here in Maryland, and so I was looking and it seemed like Total Wine was the place to stop in and get it.
Yeah.
Tell us about the beads around the bottle.
The bottle beads. So I'm very excited to share. We have our first retail partner who's bringing the beads to shelf. So they've only been available for online orders at whinybaby.com. It's so funny. This was literally like one of the original concepts that I just was like, hey, why not? At the time, they're still popular, but they were really blowing up. Their charms that hang off of your phone case. And every girl in LA had them. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's a little string on the end that could just go around the neck of a wine bottle. So it was just a fun, quirky detail that I honestly never imagined would go on store shelves. And we haven't found like a fully shelf-safe solution. And in all honesty, I think the beads got deprioritized in the sense of that takes quite a bit of development. But we had this buyer who in the Midwest, a major store, And they said, we want it, but we want it with the beads. And so we worked with our distributor partners to find out a shelf-safe way. And actually March of this year, they'll be rolling out in the Midwest. And they'll be the first kind of handful of states that will have Whiny Baby beads. But I think that goes again back to just like innovative lifestyle marketing. What's happened is people put them on their AirPod cases and their phone cases, and it says Whiny Baby on it. And so I'll run into people who they're like, oh my gosh, Whiny Baby, I have it on my phone. And so any way that wine can be more relevant in daily life and even beyond the drinking occasion is a win to me.
On that same note, how I guess you've done a lot of like podcasts, obviously, and then like social media. Like, how have you tried to make Whiny Baby part of a broader conversation without just putting out ads over and over, or just like pictures that say Whiny Baby?
Yeah. It's an ongoing process of figuring out how to weave the product more into culture. And also, to your point, like I'm always trying to look at things like a consumer. I'm like, I don't like just being like shoved ads all the time. And what do I actually get value from? So for us, it's always on content, but truly engaging and entertaining, but also educational. We constantly post pairings, but relevant pairings like chip pairings or hot girl dinner pairings, like whatever, not your like typical snooty pairings. And then also like wine cocktail recipes. I think people forget that like an Aperol Spritz is a wine cocktail, right? I think that's lost on people. And that's like the number one thing all my friends drink when they're out is Aperol Spritzes. And little things like that. And yeah, back to education as well, as much as possible, educating and content. I think another interesting element that we've included to the consumer journey is every bottle has a phone number. And so you can text it or call it. If you were to call it right now, it would give you a voicemail that says, thanks for calling Whiny Baby and not your ex. Leave us a message. And it's the mindset of when you have a glass of wine, you get crazy fingers. And I think we've all sent, it doesn't even need to be a text you regret necessarily, but you get a little more courageous on your phone. And so we thought, oh my gosh, how fun if we had like this phone number that people could interact with. And we lean into the whole, don't call your ex after a couple of glasses, call us, we'll be your safety nets. But what it's actually turned into is an amazing tool for us on the business side of, oh my gosh, like I did not realize that you work with your distributor partners. And after the television show, we went from 4 states to on about 40, gosh, I should know more off the top of my head, but about state shelves. We have distribution set up nationwide, but we're in those. And that was predominantly Total Wine and as Target as well, and several other retailers that we're going to be rolling out into this year. But when that expansion happened, it was super exciting, of course, but it's individual. It's state by state, right? So, no one tells you that, oh my gosh, you get Pennsylvania or whatever, right? And so you're like, oh my gosh, like we're going into Pennsylvania and we're going into Texas, we're going into whatever. And the time that it actually hits the store shelf is like varying. And really the only way you would know is if you like walked in there. So I'm here in California. How the heck am I supposed to know? And then I feel horrible telling our community, we're on your shelf. And they go and they're like, it wasn't there yet. It's so frustrating because you really, like, as the producer, don't have a ton of control over these things and knowing these things. And so I went, okay, I'm going to lean in and I'm going to tell our community, look, this is the reality of the situation. I don't want to waste your time. But if you do happen to be in the store, send a picture to our phone number, let me know, and I'll let people know. And that started happening. People would be like, confirmed at this store. And then I'd post it on our Instagram story and I'm like, confirmed. So I think it's just like, I'm sure you can tell, like, I just don't take myself too seriously. I don't take wine too seriously. I don't even take business too seriously because I think for every problem, like there is a solution. And rather than being like, this is a pain point, and it's lean into the pain points and you'd be surprised that your community wants to help you.
Yeah, I love that because I worked for larger companies, one that produced Stella Rosa over the years too, and they would constantly be rolling out new flavors and things, and they would be like, is it working? Has it reached this market? And they're like, we have, our distributor says it's going out, but we'll have to wait till like for Nielsen data to figure out if it's actually like there and moving. And it's, who wants to wait like months and months for all this stuff? Like when you know it's on the ground.
Wait until the first bottle's purchased to even tell people that it's there. It's like, how do you even market the product? Like, how are they supposed to know it's there? It's crazy. There's so many. Actually, one of my favorite alcohol industry nuances is I launched the brand when I was 22. Of course, I used my friends and myself in our photo shoot to launch with. And I didn't know that legally you can't show anyone in advertising for a wine product that's under the age of 25. So I owned the brand and couldn't be in my marketing materials legally. Crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's wild. Also, like, I guess what are the nuances? You can't actually be like drinking the alcohol, but you can have it.
Yeah.
Or
Yep.
yeah.
And you have to mention, this is a great one. So Target was our first big retailer that we got into. And you can't mention on social media or even a podcast like this. I can't say, go buy us at Target. I say, go buy us at Target in total, in Bevmo. And you have to mention three retailers, but not just three retailers of the same caliber and category. So I couldn't say, like, at the time it was Target and my local gas station, Soli's, and another local market, Luigi's, shout out Bakersfield. Of course, like, those were the early people taking me on. So when I first rolled out into Target, I'm like, you're telling me I have to win 2 other major accounts before I can even tell people I'm in Target? Like, this industry, it's like, they're like, oh, like, why are we failing? You make it impossible to succeed.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, you want innovation on the front end. You also want to protect like some of the legacy, but in the middle, there's a lot of gray area and room. I do wonder, and I don't know if this is like too counter to the whole narrative that we've been talking the last 40 minutes, but the wine industry in the US is massive. Like, I'm pretty sure, I was just trying to find some numbers. It's hard to find definitive numbers, but I'm pretty sure it's bigger than the energy drinks, plus the sports drinks, plus the name another category of beverage combined by multiples. I think it's like 80 to 100 billion just in the US. And so there's this whole aura around, oh, the wine industry is weak. Sales are declining, which I know we have data on, but still incredibly strong versus almost every other beverage category in the country. So I just wonder, what's your take on just that narrative of wine is failing generally? Because it's just not.
Yeah, I love everything you said, and I wish more people would say exactly what you just said. This is going to sound like selfish and bratty, quite frankly. I'm sure many of the traditional industry people who may listen to this will roll their eyes, but I just haven't paid much attention to that, those numbers and those stats. It doesn't do me any good because I'm an eternal optimist and I just don't believe it. I'm also not seeing it, but also my brand is part of the solution. I welcome all the facts and the data and say, great, I give you Whiny Baby and let's all work together. I am not competitive when it comes to a win for a wine brand is a win for the industry as a whole. And like we just talked about with it's a journey and the varietals, it's your wine, the wines you have in your fridge are just like your closet. You're not going to be like, oh, I can't, some people may, but I don't go, oh my gosh, I can't have another dress. No, like it's, you welcome it all. And yeah, maybe I should have more thoughts on it, but I just refuse to be bogged down with that and really feel that I'm part of the solution and am excited to get to work.
Yeah, the people that are grumbling mostly, I feel like, are either the massive producers who obviously feel movements of 5 or 10% in sales decline, like in a big way,
course.
Or it's the smaller producers who are trying to slap a nice label on a $50 bottle of really, really mid wine. And they're like, why isn't it selling? It's like, I would love to get rid of that part of the industry and have more wines like yours under $20, under $25 that are just like fun to drink and approachable and accessible. And then have the high end category of collectible type stuff and just get rid of all the kind of slosh in the middle.
The fluff in between. And that's what I'm really excited about. I've gotten to speak with a lot of these large companies because, as you could imagine, they're all wanting to find a solve for this. And thankfully, they're really welcoming working with other brands and people like me who are new in the industry. And I think the beauty of Whiny Baby, while we obviously have our blends and how we've made those up and grapes that we've sourced from all up and down the Central Coast, we have the ability to go, okay, what is the wines that are being produced in California? And maybe Whiny Baby could work with more of these producers or more of these, because this is what kills me. There are so many talented winemakers, and I just don't think they have the proper partners or branding and marketing themselves. And I think if there was kind of a better bridge between the two, we'd all find ourselves in a happier situation.
Yeah. And I think two examples of people doing that are like we have field recordings and then also like Massacon. There, yeah,
Yeah.
field recordings is amazing. We've had, oh my God, I'm blanking on his name. We've had him on the podcast though to talk about the amazing
He's right by
variety.
me, Paso
Yeah.
and Bakersfield.
And then they're both doing cool branding. They're using varieties that like nobody's ever heard of because they're making cool wines that are just like tasty and approachable, which is what like 90% of people care about. No, not many people are actually breaking it down by the variety itself. So I think it's really interesting, and there's a lot of people doing it well and making tasty things. But then there's that giant camp that's still stuck on we have to put the variety right here, and that's the only way people will buy stuff. It's interesting how that's happening at the same time. There's like literally, I don't know if you can see my hands going off screen here, but there's like such a dichotomy of what must happen to sell wine, and it's very interesting.
Agreed. And I just wish there was less of the you're this or you're that, you're natty or and I wish it was more. At the end of the day, it's all wine. And I think I have respect for all sides. And I think also, like I mentioned, like me being from Bakersfield and an agricultural community, like another thing, maybe this is just my own like insecurity of this, but I never want traditional industry to think I'm like some LA person who just does branding and comes in. Like I have a true love for the process and all the hands that go into it. And I think that the industry has this amazing opportunity. Gen Z loves storytelling and like quality products. And it just doesn't, that is what wine is. And so I just think we have such incredible opportunity.
Yeah, I agree. And field recordings was Andrew Jones we had on. I always think I'm making up his name because there was a baseball player named Andrew Jones, but shout out Andrew. He's great. And their wines are great.
And what he's doing in Paso, like Tin City, he's in Tin City, right? And it's a whole other topic, but beyond Whiny Baby and our wines, I have a huge passion for wine tourism and a lot of plans to talk about untapped potential. I think that wine tourism is the frontier of experiential community, and I can't wait to take that on.
Yeah, and that's something I was actually going to touch on real quick as we're getting closer to time here. But you were mentioning storytelling, and I think that's a two-way street. It's one is the brand telling the story and what goes into the bottle or what goes into the essence. But the other one is the consumer or the wine drinkers, all of us, talking about their experience with the wine. And that's why going to places, wine tourism. And I also think you even just saw Doritos this year for the Super Bowl. They crowdsourced their ad. And then they basically had people vote on it and engage with it. And it's like, why have people not really done that much before? Who knows? But basically they had like 2 months of talking about their ad and then finally it coming out. So I think incorporating the consumer, the people is really interesting. And I like the way that you're doing that. Are you seeing that a lot with your stickers? When people like posting that more or? Yeah.
My favorite stories are, it's interesting being like a forward-facing founder. It's so important. I'm always trying to challenge myself of, I think that me and my story, it is so important to the brand, but it can't stand on that alone. So the best experience is when I'm in a store and I see someone buy Whiny Baby and they literally have no idea that I'm like affiliated. Like those are my most cherished moments, because that to me is, okay, beyond me and my story in the backing, like the brand stands alone. And that's, I think, so important. But in terms of social media with the back labels, my favorite stories are like, we got one the other day that was, she had Whiny Baby at her baby shower, of course, for everyone else but herself to enjoy. And one of her friends kept the label and framed it. And then that's now in the baby's nursery. It's those sort of things that, oh my gosh, I literally get emotional. I'm a Whiny Baby. For real. Like even that, like I know it's so cheesy, but like that is what life is about. That is what wine is about. On a lighter, funnier note, I don't know if you've been tracking what's going on with the Poppy vending machines, but I think it's a brilliant example of Gen Z culture and consumers and what they expect out of brands. And there's a barrier being lifted that's never been lifted before, where consumers are consultants. And if brands are not using them as consultants, they are doing themselves a disservice. And I saw it at Red Bull. Like we would sit in a room and they'd be like, Gen Z, Gen Z, Gen Z. And I'd be like, no one in here is Gen Z but me. What are you talking about? Why don't you just ask them what they want? So what's going on with Poppy is they gifted ahead of the Super Bowl in their Super Bowl commercial a bunch of influencers, TikTokers, these Poppy vending machines in their homes. And a Discord started on TikTok, as it does. And actually fascinating. Olipop started commenting and engaging in the conversation as their competitor, saying these vending machines are $25,000. And Gen Z's like chiming in, are you kidding me? What you're giving these people like $25,000 vending machines? Like, really? And whether you believe, I mean, at the end of the day, they're a brand. They're not a charity. They don't need to be giving it out necessarily. There's a reason why. So I think we need to give a little grace to brands in that sense. But it's fascinating, the conversation that's going on with it. And then, of course, this TikTok went mega viral that said, Poppy, you were so close. All you had to do was ask those influencers that you gave those $25,000 vending machines to where they would like to place the vending machine to provide impact in a teacher's lounge, in a hospital break room, in a firefighter kitchen. And I saw that as a brand owner, and it like gave me chills, and I'm like, noted, because it is so true. They were so close. But it's hard when we're all just trying to make impact at the end of the day, and people are going to comment no matter what. Might as well take the big risks, and whether that was the right decision or not, they created discussion and commentary for their brand.
All news is good news, mostly.
Yes, I am of that mindset.
Jess, thanks so much for coming and sharing your brand and your vision for that side of the market. I think it's really awesome that you have young folks starting up wine brands and being able to hopefully tap more of the 15-year-olds so that when they turn 21.
Brady, you're part of the young folks too. You're Gen Z.
That's right. Yeah, I'm right in it. I'm in the thick of it. So yeah, no, thanks for coming on. All the best to you in your venture, and yeah, hopefully I'm gonna go up to my Total Wine actually soon and check out some of your bottles. So.
And we got distracted with so many other amazing things, but go on Hulu, watch season 2 of Food Stars. And while it was an exciting win for me and Whiny Baby, I think it was a big win for the wine industry, having a Gen Z face on there promoting wine. So go check it out. And it's fun and entertaining and part of the mission that we all want, which is more people drinking wine. So thank you so much for having me.
All right, that was our interview with Jess Druey. Everybody go find some Whiny Baby on the shelves. I am looking forward to trying it as well. But for now, that is our episode for this week, and we will be back with another episode next week. Cheers.